Good evening and welcome everyone to our special online event.
By registering, you have joined our ranks. You are on the team, and we hope you'll enjoy the content we'll be sending you from time to time, and that you'll take advantage of its ability to connect you to your legislators and other officials to make heard your voice for animals. Also, we've set aside some time at the end of this event for you to ask questions. You should see in your Zoom window a QA button or a question button. Please enter any questions or comments through that button. I'll keep an eye on them as we go along. Some I'll be able to answer in real time, others will hold for the end of the event. Tomorrow, everyone who registered will receive a link to this recording of the webinar, as well as any assets that may be mentioned throughout it. We invite you to share that link and information with anyone who may have a similar heart for animals. We hope you'll do that. Now, I'll introduce our speakers. We're joined tonight by Wayne Facelli, the founder and president of Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. The nonprofit Times has named him 7 times as one of the nation's top 50 nonprofit executives. He is the author of 2 New York Times best-selling books about animals and animal welfare, and Wayne has led efforts to pass 1,500 state laws for animals, more than 100 federal laws and amendments, 30 ballot initiatives, and 500 corporate agreements. Michael Kobliska is one of the investigators for Shark, Showing Animals Respect and Kindness, a nonprofit with supporters around the U.S. and beyond. With a small core of volunteers and a staff of 5, Shark battles tirelessly against rodeos, bullfighting, pigeon shoots, turkey shoots, canned hunts, and more. Shark is one of the nation's leading animal advocate organizations, and their many undercover investigations have resulted in myriad busts and takedowns of animal abuse activities and enterprises. Also, Kent Livesey joins us. He has worked as a wildlife biologist for California Department of Fish and Game, the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Navy, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He has more than 20 publications concerning his field work with elk, deer, radio telemetry methods, bird songs, and flight initiation distances in birds. He is also an expert in spotted owls and barred owls. A dozen years ago, he and his wife retired to Panama, where he now is a bird-watching guide. With all that said, welcome again, and I'll turn it over to Wayne Facelli.
Joseph, thank you very, very much, and welcome to all of you, and many thanks to be on the same panel with Mike Kobliska and Kent Livesey. Really appreciate the 2 of you joining me and Joseph tonight. I want to give just a quick update. A prior webinar focused on wolves, and it came, the webinar was formulated after this ghastly incident in Wyoming, where a man ran over a wolf with a snowmobile, grievously injured who we believe to be a young adolescent female, and took the severely injured animal home and then to a bar, tormenting her along the way. He still is only dealing with a small $250 fine for possessing a wild animal. And I just want to assure everybody that we are still on the case. We will not rest, nor will we relent until this man has serious charges levied against him for the animal cruelty crime he committed. More broadly, this incident really has illuminated this subculture of whacking of wildlife, where people run over animals, sometimes repeatedly, with snowmobiles as a fun exercise. The videos that we have seen online of whacking are hard to see. It is absolutely despicable, disgusting stuff. And we are working at Animal Wellness Action and the Center for Humane Economy on federal legislation to address the problem of people running over wildlife on our federal lands, wolves, coyotes, other wildlife, just for the hell of it, just for the fun of it. This is one of the most appalling and indefensible activities I've ever seen in my long career in animal welfare. And I just want to tell all of you that we are on the case. Tonight, though, I wanted to focus our attention on some forms of avian cruelty. You know, we are concerned about all animals at Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. And that, of course, includes wolves and elephants and dogs and every sort of mammalian creature you can think of. It also focuses on birds. And we have a number of campaigns where we are working to stop abuses of birds, such as age-old problems like cockfighting. And AWA and Shark are working together on a national campaign to enforce our laws against animal fighting, mainly cockfighting, but also dog fighting, and also to strengthen our laws so we can have tougher penalties when people are arrested for this awful spectacle of staged animal cruelty. So we're going to talk a little bit about that campaign. We're also going to talk about live pigeon shoots. Hard to believe that this practice also exists in our society, where pigeons are collected from cities or some other jurisdiction, and they are brought into another jurisdiction in boxes, and then they're put in special boxes where the top is pulled open. Birds flutter up a few feet, and then from about 30 feet, somebody shoots the animal. This is supposed to be target practice. It's supposed to be sporting. It's supposed to be fun. It's certainly not sporting. I can't believe it's fun for anyone to maim a living creature just for target practice when we have sporting clays. We have a number of other target shooting, established recreational activities, setups all around the country for people to hone their skills in shooting a fast-moving target. Shark has done pioneering work in exposing this. I worked with Shark's founder and president, Steve Hindy, 30 years ago, with many thousands of other people who trekked to a small community in the coal country of Pennsylvania, where the Higgins pigeon shoot was conducted, where as many as 5,000 birds were shot in just an orgy of killing, again, just for the hell of it. So tonight, we're going to talk about those two things, but we're going to start off talking about a government program that involves killing birds. So in the case of cockfighting, it's private individuals. These are lawless people who are involved in cockfighting, since cockfighting is outlawed everywhere in the United States. Pigeon shooting is outlawed in some jurisdictions, but not others. But again, it's private citizens doing it. In this case, we're talking about a government plan. A government plan motivated in part by good intentions. And that good intention is to protect the northern spotted owl and the California spotted owl, both listed as threatened species under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. These animals have suffered from habitat loss and the destruction of old growth forests, and they're a sensitive species. They were the focus of major wars over timber cutting in California, Oregon, and Washington starting in the 1980s and into the 90s. Many of these forests were protected because of the spotted owl and also the marbled murrelet, another species of bird that has a strong aquatic habitat that it also lives in addition to old growth forests. But now our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is to be protecting our native species, not just under the Endangered Species Act, but also under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and a number of other federal wildlife protection statutes, has proposed a plan that truly is unprecedented in American wildlife management history. And that plan is to kill, over 30 successive years, nearly 500,000 barred owls, one of the 19 owl species in the United States, and all, like the spotted owl, a forest owl, to kill them in the Pacific coast states, where now their habitat overlaps with spotted owls. And this is not the original habitat of barred owls. Through human disturbance and through a number of other factors, barred owls over the last set of decades have colonized additional parts of North America, including the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to hear from Kent Livesey about this issue, and I'm going to chat with him about the problem that we're facing in the United States, where the Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed this as its preferred option to protect spotted owls in an environmental impact statement that it has issued, a draft environmental impact statement. It took public comment in November, December, and January, closed that comment, and now it's been, more than 5 months since that comment period closed, the Fish and Wildlife Service can make a decision really at any time to unleash people to go shoot barred owls in incredible numbers. So this is a deeply distressing outcome to me. We at AWA and the Center for Humane Economy are strongly opposed to this barred owl killing plan. And I want to start off by showing a video that was made for us today by Hilary Franz. She is the Commissioner of Public Lands in the state of Washington, one of the range states for spotted owls and now barred owls. She is the top environmental protector in Washington state. She and her team, she oversees the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, oversee more than 3 million acres of habitat in Washington state. So she comes with incredible responsibility on this set of issues of forest protection, wildlife protection, and you'll hear her statement now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I am Hilary Franz, Washington State's Commissioner of Public Lands, and I'm honored to spend a few moments with you discussing my recent letter to the Department of Interior. In June 1990, the northern spotted owl was officially listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, a landmark decision that reverberated across entire landscapes and reshaped the future of forest management in Washington State and along the West Coast. But now, almost exactly 34 years later, the spotted owl remains at risk, this time by one of its own, the barred owl. As the leader of our state's Department of Natural Resources, I'm committed to the health and survival of the spotted owl. My staff and I manage over 3 million acres of public lands, 2 million acres of forest lands, and we work constantly and compassionately to protect all threatened and endangered species on those lands. My commitment to environmental protection and preservation has been unwavering. However, I have serious concerns about the Department of Interior's current plan to address the spotted owl issue, which is why I recently wrote a letter to Secretary Deb Haaland expressing those concerns and inviting her team and I to meet so that we can discuss the potential repercussions of this plan and hopefully explore other options. I understand the risk that the barred owl poses. The explosive growth of this species across the Pacific Northwest threatens the food supply, habitats, and sustainability of the spotted owl. Having said that, I don't believe that a decades-long plan to kill nearly 500,000 barred owls across 14 million acres of land represents a solution that is absolutely viable, affordable, or achievable. In fact, it raises an enormous amount of questions, which is why I sent the letter. How can the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service guarantee that only barred owls will be targeted? How could we prevent the surviving barred owls from simply recolonizing and repopulating the very areas we're trying to preserve? And with so many species now facing extinction, how can we justify spending nearly $250 million on one species when our funding and resources are limited and so many other species are struggling to survive, like our salmon? To put it simply, I think we can do better, and we have too many questions that need to be answered. I care deeply about the fate and future of the spotted owl. I've spent my entire career working on environmental protection and good management and stewardship of critical species that are threatened. But killing off one species to safeguard another can't be the only solution, especially considering that barred owls are also protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And especially when, at this scale, the ripple effects could have significant impact on local ecosystems and habitats, not to mention local economies and communities. And that is why I expressed my concerns to Secretary Haaland and raising significant questions that I think need to be answered before a decision is made. And I'm urging her team to consider those options and discuss these issues with my team and other land managers like my agency. As climate change continues to reshape our landscape, the choices and challenges we face are extremely complicated, with consequences we can't even begin to understand. We need to consider those consequences now, not 30 years from now. And so to each of you, I want to thank you for all you do and your tireless efforts. Your advocacy on this issue played a key role in alerting me to the scale of what is being proposed. Your passion and purpose are why I'm raising these concerns and believe these questions need to be answered before a plan is put in place. And so I want to thank you and look forward to working beside you.
Well, listen, I want to tell you that that is a really important statement from a very important public official in a range state for the spotted owl and now the barred owl. I want to underscore again, that's Hillary Franz, the Commissioner of Public Lands for the state of Washington. She is a twice elected commissioner. There's only one commissioner. She covers the entire state of Washington. I'm glad to tell you that though she's concluding her second term, she's seeking to stay in public office. She's running as a Democrat to succeed Derek Kilmer in the 6th Congressional District in Washington, which covers Tacoma, but also the Olympic Peninsula, which is a very important forested area in Washington state. So she comes to this issue, as you heard, with a lot of experience. And I want to thank Commissioner Franz for stepping out on this issue and speaking up. And I also want to thank Kent Livesey. Kent has worked, as you heard in the introduction, for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, for the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. As a researcher, he is a peer-reviewed. His work has been peer-reviewed time and again and published in academic journals, wildlife management journals. And Kent, thank you for joining us from Panama tonight. You have retired from these agencies, wildlife protection and forest agencies. And I'd love for you to just build a little bit on what Commissioner Franz had to say. Tell us a little bit about the spotted owl and barred owl controversy in the Pacific Northwest. You're muted still.
There we go. Yes, I'd like to, I just dropped something. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I have a little slideshow that I'd like to present that'll kind of fill in the blanks. When working for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Washington State's Northwest Forest Plan Division, I wrote a dozen publications concerning various aspects of the competition between spotted and barred owls. Following is a very simplified description of my two-part 30-page analysis of the range expansion of barred owls. Next. Fire kills trees but stimulates grasses, and Native Americans managed the Great Plains through fire. Next. Thereby keeping the plains basically free of trees. Next. But European settlers had a different land management strategy. They prevented fires, suppressed fires, and planted millions of trees. Next. As the plains became more and more treed, many forest birds were able to move across the central US and southern Canada. Next. These included Mississippi kites, western kingbirds, eastern phoebes, eastern bluebirds, blue jays, and of course, barred owls. The listing of the northern spotted owl was threatened in 1990, and the establishment of Northwest Forest Plan in 1994 handled protection of the owl's forest habitat. Starting about a decade later, researchers started realizing that barred owl was also a threat. Next. Spotted and barred owls are very similar and they're closely related, but barred owls are larger, more aggressive, and produce more young. Next. As shown in my synthesis of the literature throughout North America concerning barred owls and the habitat of prey, barred owls use a wider variety of forests and eat a wider variety of prey than spotted owls do. Next. About 15 years ago, when I was working on the recovery plan for the northern spotted owl, the service was considering experimental control of thousands of barred owls. In response to that, I wrote 2 publications. Next. In the first, I put that idea into global perspective. I found 194 instances of negative effects between native birds and birds of concern worldwide. No more than a total of about 40 raptors were killed annually in the US to address negative effects between native birds. Just 40 total. In the second publication, next, I explored implications of such management on other range-expanding species in the US and Canada. I found that 111 bird species had recently expanded their breeding ranges into at least one new state or province, 14 of which had expanded their ranges more than barred owls had. I concluded that if we respond to competition between native species by killing large numbers of one of them, it seems likely the Fish and Wildlife Service soon will consider killing more and more native birds due to the high frequency and large extent of range expansions, probability that range expanses will continue, especially with climate change, and increases in number of listed species and subspecies.
Thank you for running through so much information in such a compact period, and that's really helpful. I'll tell you that your own research and writing was very helpful to me in examining this issue. And I think, to me, one of the most important works that you did, or set of works, was about range expansion, that birds and other animals don't just, live in a distinct area and then stay there forever. We now have many human disturbances of our environment. You pointed to some of the historical manipulations of the environment by Native American communities and also then by European settlers. But this is ongoing, right? I mean, one could argue that what's happening, presently with climate change and the like is going to really force adaptations for many species. It's probably going to push many species toward endangerment. But if we just look at the encyclopedia range of these animals and say, well, they're non-native because they've stretched beyond that area, to me, that's just opening a very dangerous Pandora's box, it seems.
I agree.
Tell me, you said it was 111 bird species at range expansion?
Yeah, it's like 20% of the birds in the US and Canada.
Right. Barred owls moved because of these changing, that basically they needed trees to hopscotch across the West, essentially, because of forest owls. Were there other bird species who moved as far as the barred owl?
Well, I think I mentioned there are 14 that moved even more than barred owls did. The most extreme example is cattle egrets. They flew from Africa across the Atlantic into Brazil, and now there are throughout much of South America, Central America, and North America.
Yeah. Wow, I had no idea. Do we call them an exotic when they came on their own? Usually we think of exotics, when they hitch a ride on a boat, or if they're introduced through a hunting ranch or for fur farming. But
that's introduced, yeah.
Yes, right. That was an introduced species. Yeah. So these animals made it on their own, essentially.
On their own.
Yes. One of the things that really struck me about this plan for the Fish and Wildlife Service, having, studied wildlife and worked on wildlife issues for my entire adult life, I've seen, the effects of wild pigs on the environment. I've seen the effect of nutria on the environment. The United States, through USDA's Wildlife Services, as well as some of the other federal and state agencies, engage in control programs. And typically they failed for many of these species that have occupied a large area. They've been somewhat more successful for island ecosystems and contained ecosystems where they could eradicate the animals or get close to eradicating them. But then there was a barrier for re-entry and recolonization, like a body of water would prevent wild pigs from getting back onto an island. Here we have, I think it's 24 million acres is the physical area of that Northwest Forest Management zone that you...
Northwest Forest Plan, yes.
Yeah, the Northwest Forest Plan. And, in terms of the spotted owls, I don't know if they occupy all of that, but we're talking somewhere between 14 million, 24 million acres. How in the heck is the United States going to prevent barred owls from recolonizing the areas from which they'd been shot.
They can't. I mentioned how barred owls have a wider use of habitat and a wider use of prey than spotted owls do. Why that's important in this is that spotted owls are kind of picky eaters, and they're picky on where they're going to live. They eat just like small mammals, and they have these gigantic home ranges. In the Olympic Peninsula, it's tens of thousands of acres. Barred owls, however, eat basically anything that moves, and they can live on fragmented forests or whatever. So they're in much more large area. Most of Western Washington, little forest patches have barred owls in them. And so a spotted owl could have 4 pairs of barred owls in its territory. Barred owls don't need much land because they're eating everything. They're eating earthworms, slugs, fish, crayfish, whatever. So, and then a lot of those spotted owl territories, if they're not vacant, they're totally full of barred owls. And if you shoot them now, you hope spotted owls find a way to get in there. But there are always barred owls coming in from other areas where spotted owls even aren't, to the periphery.
Well, and this, I think the other element is it's a flighted animal. It's one thing for an animal to walk or run a long distance, but these animals can cover ground very quickly.
Oh,
so
hundreds of miles.
Coming down from BC, where there are basically no northern spotted owls, but there are barred owls, is not going to be a problem for them.
Oh, no, right. Yeah, the dispersal of these juveniles is 50 miles, 100 miles. They just go. When they fledge, they just go.
So here you have a federal agency that's supposed to protect MBTA protected animals as well as ESA protected animals, and they want to kill hundreds of thousands of them, but nothing's going to prevent this. They're not going to go into BC to kill them. They're not going to go to the Midwest or the East to kill them. And they're not going to kill all the barred owls within the Northwest Forest Management Area. So they're just going to have an endless commitment to killing barred owls. 30 years is really just the beginning, it seems to me.
Correct. It'd be forever.
Yeah.
And it's not only within the Northwest Forest Plan area, it's the outside it's outside of that. Anywhere you have trees.
Yeah.
It's like Bainbridge Island. This little island in the Puget Sound has got a dozen pairs of barred owls now.
So the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to hire people to go out, probably in pairs, to do electronic calls, call the barred owls in and shoot them. How long? I mean, what kind of price tag is there going to be here in your estimate?
Well, the EIS did not give a price tag. And I thought that was interesting. They did a lot of explanations about why they can't. But I would argue, you say, here's the cheap end, here's the expensive end, and here's kind of an average. But they didn't choose to do that. I mean, some pairs are going to be right by a dirt road. Other pairs are going to be an hour hike up and down rugged terrain to try to find these owls. And you call them in either vocally or by a recorder. And you might get the female, you don't get the male. So you have to come back another day. I mean, if you were to just come up with, we don't know, $500 on an average.
For a day, for a pair of people?
No, I'm saying $500 on an average to kill a barred owl.
Oh, to kill one barred owl. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be less in some areas, like I said, and it could be more in other areas. You have to go back repeatedly, whatever. And you do the math with the numbers they have in their EIS, you come up with $250 million.
Yeah.
I mean, even if that's a little high, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah. And the annual budget for the Endangered Species Recovery Program and all 1,600 ESA listed species, animals and plants, are supposed to have recovery plans. So this would be, we calculated 11 or 12% annual just for this one animal control program, which doesn't preserve an acre of habitat. It'd be 11 or 12%. So you could do, if other species cost that much, you could do maybe 8 other species at best out of 1,600. So really, you're cannibalizing money that could be effectively spent to protect other threatened endangered species. And it strikes me that, there's a lot of passion from folks who've worked on this issue with you, and they want to save the spotted owl for all the right reasons. but someone's got to look at the macro level issues of practicality and expense and make a judgment. This is why we actually had the God Squad for the Endangered Species Act to make some of these decisions and not to just do anything and everything, violating some of our moral precepts in doing so, and then also having an immense expense that's going to deprive other species of needed money. So that was a bitter conclusion that I came to in looking at this issue.
The problem is that the spotted owl has become the poster child for old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
Marbled murrelets are just same thing, but no one cares about them. They just don't. It's like owls are so cute. So, and that's like the poster child. So everyone's afraid that if you give up on the spotted owl, that old growth forests are going to be logged. So I suggest, and I have been suggesting for a long time, what we need to do is protect old growth forests for themselves. They shouldn't have to be dependent on one species to protect it at a tune of this kind of money and carnage. Maybe we need an old growth forest protection act. I don't know.
Yeah. Has one last question for you. Has any other country ever contemplated a raptor killing plan of this magnitude?
No. Remember, I had for the US and our territories, the most I came up with was 40 raptors a year. And that was a lot of the largest project before this barred owl thing was killing of about, I think it's 15 red-tailed hawks a year to protect the critically endangered Puerto Rican parrot, as you said, on an island where you can have some control. Red tails still fly across from the mainland to Puerto Rico, but they can kill them. And they're critically endangered parrots on an island. And that was like 17 a year.
Yeah.
There's nothing even close, nothing even orders and orders of magnitude.
Kent, I want to thank you so much for all of your work to protect spotted owls and barred owls and other forest owls and other wildlife. Thank you very much for joining us. One of the things that we just spoke about is killing raptors, the government doing it. One other group that kills raptors are the cockfighters. And I want to bring in Steve Hindy, who's the founder and president of Showing Animals Respect and Kindness, and Mike Kobliska, who is also a leader with Shark. And both of these men have done courageous things to expose animal cruelty. And Steve, are we going to get to see you or just your name? Are you going to join us visually?
It appears so.
There we go. Great.
Sorry about the backdrop. I'm a field grunt, so I'm in the field.
Yeah, you're in the field. I know you're working on animal cruelty issues for the last hour, or at least the last hour. So thank you for joining us. These cockfighting birds are raised by the millions in the United States. They are specially bred. They are distinct breeds used for fighting. They're different from the chickens that are raised for eggs and for meat and for a variety of other purposes in our society. And they're housed distinctly. Steve, tell us just a little bit about what a cockfighting farm looks like, if you would.
A cockfighting farm is this, if it's a big farm, it's just this enormous mass, this system of rows, and not rows of corn or soybeans or something like that, but rows of roosters that are individually tethered to either like a little teepee type structure, a little mini teepee tent, or a 20-gallon barrel that's up on its end with a hole cut in it. And they're very distinctive. You've seen one of them, you'll always be able to recognize one, where there's just these rows and rows of these structures with a fighting rooster attached to every single one of these little shelters that they give them.
And they can't reach the other, right? So the tether
whole point
prevents them from interacting, which is
that is correct.
But they're outside. And Mike, when I was talking about predator control, we've seen many cases. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service special agents have arrested cockfighters for setting up pole traps. They have a pole stuck in the ground, a tall pole that the birds perch on, predatory birds perch on, and they have a leg hole trap. It's called a pole trap at the top of it. I mean, they engage in killing hawks, eagles, owls, other raptors who may threaten these tethered animals out in the open and exposed.
Yep, we see that at a lot of these rooster farms. They can't stand any type of predator coming in and the chance that they're going to eat these roosters. So they're very ruthless in killing any type of predator, including dogs, cats, whatever stumbles into that yard gets killed.
Yeah.
As well as the birds of prey.
I'd like to go to some of the drone footage that Shark has obtained. Shark has done incredible work with drones to expose cockfighting venues as well as the breeding farms. And Shark has sent people into cockfights as well. And I'd like to go to the video to just give our viewers and listeners or viewers an opportunity to see one of these aerial views of these farms. So this is in winter. So all of those little black things are the houses or teepees or blue barrels that Steve was referring to. Steve, do you want to take over from here?
Yeah, this is, they've, as you can see, as you look at the different views, there are different types of shelters for different age ranges of animals. So, like the little the stags, will be in one set of housing, the battlecocks will be in another, and so on and so on. And as you can see, these can be enormous operations.
Yeah.
And really, when you raise a fighting rooster, you're raising a rooster for fighting. Fighting roosters are not used, they're not involved, they're not needed in egg production. They're not needed for food to be eaten. Fighting roosters are being raised for fighting, and fighting roosters or any other animals in the U.S. is completely illegal. Shipping fighting roosters within the U.S. or outside of its boundaries from the U.S. to the outside world is illegal. So it's really just completely nuts. It's like allowing somebody to produce illegal drugs so long as they don't take them. That's not going to work. It's like allowing somebody to produce weapons of war and expecting them to not to be used anywhere. It's just ridiculous.
Well, it's also the pricing, Steve. You could sell a battle, cock trios, for $1,200 or $1,500. And who's going to buy a chicken for egg production or meat production for that kind of money? Nobody. The alternative price for a different use would be $1 or $2. These are animals who are raised for fighting, and the only people interested in them are other fighters. So can you have a cockfighting breeder who's not a cockfighter?
Either a cockfighter or at the bare minimum, a supplier of illegal cockfighting. That's it.
But what cockfighter is going to be interested in a chicken who's coming from people who's not involved in fighting? Just like no one who wants to buy a racing horse is going to go to someone not involved in horse racing.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, they've got to prove that their fighting birds are worthy opponents. So yeah, if you go to buy a rooster, they're going to show you their line of roosters fighting. And many, for instance, I forget the fellow now in Alabama.
Brent Easterling.
Easterling, and many of these guys, they have fighting facilities on their property. Other ones in Alabama that we busted, in fact, and recently in Mississippi. Sure, they're fighting right there, and fighting birds are for fighting, period.
Mike, you and Shark, I know you personally have gotten some footage of some of these cockfighting breeders taking birds to post offices, U.S. Postal Service offices, having a bird in a box and shipping that bird down to the border with Mexico and the United States. So you get them to say Eagle Pass, Texas, right on the border. And then the cartels come and they run up and grab the birds for the cockfighting arenas that they control in Mexico. You've done this in Mississippi. Let's see some of the footage that you've taken on this subject. So tell us who Melinda Fairchild.
Yep, here we are at the post office. These are fighting roosters being delivered that they have sold, and these particular birds are being shipped to Texas at the border, and they're going to be taken over into Mexico. And this is one of the financial engines that drives cockfighting, is the ability of these breeders to sell these birds for big money. And they're using the post office to ship these, what are illegal fighting roosters. And they're allowed to use the post office that way.
And the Postal Service, there's a prohibition on shipping fighting birds through the U.S. Postal Service, but the cockfighters say, oh, I'm just a breeder. And these people on the other end, I don't know what they're going to do with these birds. That's such a complete and utter lie, because no one's interested in spending this kind of money to just buy a bird. And Guam was the perfect example. You know, we did an investigation at Animal Wellness Action that looked at all of the documents of imported birds to Guam. And over 5 years, there were 12,000 birds shipped, almost all roosters, to Guam. Guam doesn't have a commercial egg-laying industry. It doesn't have a broiler bird industry. It doesn't have a game show bird industry. There's no other reason for 12,000 adult roosters to come from people like Bobby Fairchild, Melinda Fairchild's husband, or Johnny Jumper or his son, or John Bottoms in Oklahoma, who are all on the web talking about what great cutting birds they have. So the U.S. Postal Service is allowing this contraband and has not made a single arrest. Steve, I think you share my frustration about this.
Well, this is completely nuts. You know, we have informed the post office over and over. I mean, obviously, we make these videos very public. The ones you just showed of deliveries to the post office are up on YouTube. You know, people all over the country and all over the world are seeing this. So I frankly, you know, I want to support the U.S. Post Office. When I see their advertisements go, oh, ship through the U.S. Post Office, I go, hell no. Hell no. You're supporting the cockfighting industry. You realize how difficult it would be to ship these illegal birds across the country and beyond if the post office said no. All the commercial carriers have stopped this, and it's an absolute outrage that the U.S. Post Office is supporting cockfighting in a major way.
Yeah, you know, and it's I'll tell you, Steve, it's very frustrating for me because I crafted the federal legislation to ban any interstate movement of fighting animals, and to specifically forbid the Postal Service from doing this. So in response to its dereliction of duty, we have a new bill called the Fight Act, H.R. 2742 and S. 1529, bipartisan bills in both chambers of Congress, to forbid shipping an adult rooster through the U.S. mail. And we contacted many of the ag shipping companies. They said they don't ship adult roosters through the U.S. mail anyway, so no conflict with normal agricultural practices. So this is very deeply frustrating. They should be able to enforce the law now, and we're not telling them, you know, you're off the hook until we pass this new law. Enforce it now, but we're going to have an additional layer of protection if we can get the Congress to act on this legislation. And, you know, these birds are raised at these cockfighting farms. The U.S. is the cockfighting breeding capital of the world. They're shipped by mail or by other means, and then they're going to people on the other end who are conscripting them into fights. And at these fights, Shark has documented children attending. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about what we're going to see next. We're not going to show you gory images here. We're going to give you a sense of the environment and how a cockfight arena operates and how it looks, what it looks like. Sure,
this is undercover footage from inside a cockfighting arena. It's a small pit lined with a fence, and they put the birds in there, and it's a fight to the death. You can see the spectators in the background. these are big buildings. These aren't fly-by-night operations. These are permanent structures that law enforcement is ignoring in these places. Some of these have been there for years and years. They hold it on the same day every week, and it gets ignored. So you can see all the spectators and gamblers. And we see this a lot. There are children that show up at these fights, and they're witness to all this cruelty. We even see them taking part in the fighting. And it's a terrible thing to see.
Well, listen, I really want to note that I've been working on animal fighting issues for many, many years. I've worked to upgrade the laws all across the country, dog fighting and cockfighting. And I tell you, the shark efforts in this have given such an enormous boost to the anti-cockfighting cause. And I want to thank the two of you so much for working on this issue. And these are birds. Again, this is what we're talking about tonight is avian exploitation. They shouldn't be forgotten. These birds feel pain just like mammals do. And this is grievous cruelty where knives or curved ice picks called gaffs are affixed to the bird's legs and they are hacked to death for human amusement. The bodies are thrown away. There's no utilization of the carcass at all. And the animals are pumped full of steroids or ketamine or other substances to enhance their musculature and their aggression. And it's a despicable industry. And we are working. Our two organizations, I would hazard to say, are leading the effort to eradicate this activity. Let's just spend a couple minutes only because I want to take a couple of questions from people. We're also working on live pigeon shoots. And Steve, before you joined us because of your work in the field, I mentioned Higgins 30 years ago, and we're on the cusp, I think, of passing legislation in Pennsylvania to outlaw live pigeon shoots. But Shark uncovered a network of wealthy individuals who clandestinely hold live pigeon shoots. And in South Florida, you discovered one. Tell us, Steve, just a little bit about that.
Right. We were contacted by a source who informed us about this. And the Jack Link's company, the one that puts out the beef jerky. You see them in the commercials. They got the cute commercials with Sasquatch, it's kind of cute to watch and all that. But that company is being run by Troy Link, who is heavily involved in these live pigeon shoots. And frankly, and he, not just that, I mean, he's got other cases where man just seems to hate animals or take out his aggression on animals. Pigeon shooters, generally speaking, they're some of the most twisted people I've ever seen because, you can say about the cockfighters, it goes back generations and all this. The pigeon shooters tend to be extremely wealthy people. These are people, Troy Link can do almost anything he wants. He's got his own helicopter. He lives like a pasha. He can do almost anything he wants. And guys, him and his associates, I know about quite a number of live pigeon shooters. They can do anything that they want. And what they want to do is stand at a line and blast the living daylights out of live pigeons being tossed out of boxes. It's not even a hunting scenario. They're being tossed out of boxes in front of them at close range, and all they want to do is blow the inside of those pigeons out hour after hour, day after day, year after year. They're a bunch of really just sick, perverse, sorry losers of human beings.
I couldn't agree more. Mike, tell us a little bit about the lead ammo. And again, we're going back to raptors, right? We started with barred owls, and we talked about cockfighters engaging in predator control, killing raptors. But in Florida, your drones caught many of the birds are just, as Steve mentioned, blown to smithereens at close range. But some, were wounded and fly off the field, and these are typically rural areas. So they get into the woods and they crash, land, and then what happens?
Yeah, and then they're left out there to suffer, to slowly die, and eventually they're going to be eaten by other predators, and that lead is being ingested by other animals. While this shoot goes on, you can see the birds of prey circling. They know what's going on, and they know, there's going to be supper before too long, and they're coming down and eating those lead-filled birds. A good percentage of the birds are killed immediately, and they drop down, they're picked up, and they're thrown away like garbage. But a lot of those birds make it off into the surrounding countryside, and they're just slowly picked off by other animals, and that lead gets spread far and wide.
So we worked on this together in Florida with Shark doing the really great on the ground work. And then, we're going to try to get some legislation passed in Florida to ban these live shoots. We do think it's illegal under state law, but it's not been enforced yet. But again, just like with our Fight Act, where we're underscoring the illegality of it. And unfortunately, that additional legislative action is sometimes needed to goad enforcement agencies to act. But the guy in Georgia, you then exposed in May, a guy in Georgia who has a whole complex on his land, shooting setup. And this guy, Steve, is under indictment already for endangered species and other federal wildlife protection law violations.
Right. Again, you have a very, very wealthy doctor, and this guy's got some kind of fetish for bringing in dead birds, dead endangered birds, and eggs. What does he do? What does he do? Caress these eggs in the middle of the night? I don't know what's with this guy. And you can't get any of them on the line. I would love nothing more than to be able to get this guy in a webinar, a webcast, or a debate. We've been after these pigeon shoots. You and I got into it at about the same time, way back when we were youngsters, relatively speaking. And I haven't been able to debate one of these cowards in, what are we talking about, 3 decades? They're not only sick, twisted people who just get their jollies out of just doing the worst they can to animals, but they're low-life cowards. And I just don't know how to put it any other way. We'd love to draw them out. We give them opportunities. If they have a side, we're willing to give them their say. On the same platform that we have, they won't do it. They know what they are, and they're really twisted cowards.
Well, they keep it quiet. They don't want anyone to
Absolutely.
see it. They don't want anyone to know that they're doing it, and they don't like the exposure that we're delivering to them.
We've got some
Joseph-
of their communications where they make it, they just really are on it. Do not bring in your phone. Do not communicate this. And it's funny, they'll say, do not communicate this by social media, and they're communicating by social media. So they're not terribly bright either. And really another problem, I know maybe because they just have too much money to actually practice, they do it for kicks, but they're not good at it. So when Mike talks about how many animals get away, it's actually a pretty high percentage. So some people consider pigeons to be a pest species, and so they say it doesn't matter if they're shooting pigeons, but actually these guys are bringing pigeons from a location that may be hundreds and hundreds of miles away into an area, and they're propagating the pigeon population in a different area. It's just really.
It's a complete, one of the ways that you clear the path for exploitation of animals is to demonize them or diminish them, call them pests, call them invasives, call them exotics, and it makes it easier to do terrible things for them. The hypocrisy in this case is that they're bringing those animals into the community.
Right.
They are repopulating the community with these animals, yet they're still invoking this pest characterization, which again, if reason and logic matter, there's nothing to their argument. There's nothing to their argument. And it's just reduced to killing for the sake of human amusement. And, again, when we talk about barred owls and killing them, that's not being done for fun. That's done because the government and people who were involved in protecting northern spotted owls feel desperate to protect them. And they are willing to do almost anything, it seems, to achieve that goal. And it's a good goal. I mean, I'm all for protecting the northern spotted owl. The problem is you can't do anything. You have to have limits. Certain things are out of bounds. And shooting 500,000 Migratory Bird Treaty Act protected forest owls is out of bounds. And how we somehow get to this place where we think this is okay is really difficult to imagine. But I tell you, I see other things that make no sense, like cockfighters. It's illegal in all 50 states. It's a federal felony. Yet there are tens of thousands of these people in the United States. We think there may be 20 million fighting birds. Hundreds of thousands are being shipped to Mexico every year. I wrote a piece for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram yesterday about this separate border crisis, or the unknown border crisis. That is the trafficking of animals across our border. Hundreds of thousands going from the United States into Mexico to cartel-controlled cockfights, and then tens of thousands coming in from Mexico to the United States to fight at pits here, many of them also controlled by cartels and narcotics traffickers. Because you don't just see these people who know they're engaging in lawless animal cruelty somehow become law-abiding citizens otherwise. They're involved in illegal gambling, money laundering, narcotics trafficking, and often human-on-human violence. There have been multiple mass shootings in Mexico, 20 people shot, 16 people killed at cockfighting arenas. In the United States, there was just a young man who shot his own uncle in Hidalgo, Texas, over a cockfighting dispute just about 2 weeks ago. There was a 16-year-old boy from Washington. His father took him to a cockfight in Mexico. The father was shot, the boy was killed. This is a violent, criminal subculture. And with pigeon shooting, it's a clandestine subculture. And I can't find it in me to explain why otherwise rational people would think that it's okay to hurt these animals just for their amusement. You know, we do view in society certain animal uses as acceptable. A lot of people do, you know, if it's for food or for science, you know, we have different standards, but we've kind of gone past the idea, and there's basically a social consensus on the idea that if you're just killing animals for the hell of it, running over a wolf with a snowmobile, shooting a pigeon or hundreds of pigeons, you know, brought in just to be shot from 20 feet away, or putting knives on birds' legs and having them hack each other to death, that all of that is wrong. It should be criminalized and the law should be enforced. So this is what I think you can tell that Steve is passionate about this issue. I'm passionate. Mike is passionate. Kent is passionate. Joseph, my colleague, Joseph Grove, our host, is passionate. We wanted to present to you tonight some information about avian exploitation in the United States, but not just as an historical matter, not to document it, to do something about it. And, you know, I don't know if Merritt Clifton is and Beth Clifton are listening in, but they've also been incredible partners in exposing these issues. And I want to just mention as a final element that there's a sheriff in Carter County, Oklahoma, who's been enforcing anti-cruelty laws. And Steve got a tip with Shark that there was an illegal cockfight. Our Oklahoma State Director at AWA, Kevin Chambers, joined him. They documented this fight. They called the cops. The sheriff and his deputies enforced the law. They arrested a bunch of people. And the cockfighters targeted this guy. They targeted the sheriff, who was primaried in the Republican primary for sheriff this week on June 18th. And we tried to, you know, we reached voters and talked to them about this. And if you can believe this, the vote for sheriff between the anti-cockfighting sheriff who's enforcing the rule of law and his challenger was 2,569 to 2,569. We just needed one more person to step up and support a sheriff who's enforcing the rule of law. But we fell one vote short, which reminds me that all of us can make a difference. Every one of us raising our voice, through our own personal habits, you know, and our lifestyle choices, saving animals and protecting animals and sparing them, and getting involved politically. Every one of us has a voice. Every one of us has a choice to make on these issues. So please don't be a bystander. Please continue to get involved in these issues. Support us at Animal Wellness Action and the Center for the Humane Economy. Support Shark. We are using your money efficiently to take on some of the most ruthless forms of cruelty or other forms of exploitation that really can't meet the test of fair and sensible behavior. So Joseph, thank you for hosting us tonight. You're muted though.
Sure, Wayne. Thank you. I always feel like when you speak at the end, like the guy at church who tells the preacher to be quiet because he wants to go to Cracker Barrel. So we are a little bit over, but I have a couple of questions I want to pose to the group. First of all, we will send out the recording of the webinar tomorrow. Please do share it on social media. One person asked whether she could, and certainly the answer to that is yes. Another question we had is concerns the bill numbers for the House and Senate. This would be the FIGHT Act. I'll include a link tomorrow in the email so that you can easily take action on the FIGHT Act. You'll be able to go to this link and fill out a couple of fields, your name. Our system will automatically generate a letter on your behalf to your representative and your senators for that. So that's another issue that was asked about. A quick question for Steve. How are they able to hide these cockfighting farms, or are they just being ignored by local law enforcement? Quick answer from you, please, sir.
Some of them are hidden, some of them are not. Look, I want to believe that the vast majority of police in this country are good people, but not all of them are. And some of them are well aware of the farms and the cockfighting that goes along with them, and they protect them, or they at least do not take action. Obviously, we're working to try to stop that. The FIGHT Act will help. The FIGHT Act is vital to try to spur proper movement from law enforcement everywhere.
All right, very good. Thank you. And when the U.S. Postal Service is confronted, Steve or Michael, about their shipping Gamecocks, what is their response if they offer one to its illegitimacy?
Well, on the local level, I mean, I have called post offices, local post offices. Why are you shipping these adult fighting roosters? They're for illegal purposes. Down in Mississippi, they said, what, do you want us to turn away the business? I said, yeah. Along with illegal drugs, illegal weapons, yeah. And but you know, otherwise what happens is that otherwise intelligent people, like in more in the higher levels of the post office, otherwise intelligent people suddenly become extremely confused and stupid. Look, everybody knows they shouldn't be doing it. They just choose to not take action because it would be work. As far as I can see, it's as simple as that. They just choose not to do it, which is why we have to increase the pressure. Mike, you have anything to add?
No, I think that's accurate. Unfortunately, yeah, they use these post offices that are in very small communities as well. They don't take them to the big post office. And I think these smaller ones are happy for the business, and they're willing to turn a blind eye.
I want to tell you that the national law enforcement community has swung behind the FIGHT Act, which does more than just forbid the shipment of adult roosters to the U.S. mail. It creates a private right of action to allow groups like ours to bring civil cases against cockfighters or dogfighters if there's a lack of enforcement. It also has criminal forfeiture provisions to seize property or trucks used in the commission of these dogfighting and cockfighting crimes. And I'm really pleased to announce to everybody that the two leading law enforcement agencies in the country, the National Sheriff's Association, which consists of basically all of the elected 3,000 or so elected sheriffs in the United States, has endorsed the FIGHT Act. And so has the National Association of District Attorneys, which are all the elected prosecutors in those same 3,100 counties that constitute the United States. Now we've got hundreds of others. I don't disagree at all with what Steve said. Most of the law enforcement folks are committed. They want to see this stop. They've got a lot of other things to do, and they are probably, many of them are not aware of these problems until we bring it to their attention. But you do have some folks who've been corrupted by the cockfighters, and one of those guys lost on Tuesday. In the race that we were involved in, we put a little effort also in Atoka County, Oklahoma, and a sheriff named Tony Head, who was protecting the cockfighters there, was ousted on Tuesday. So that was a fabulous outcome in Oklahoma. And we're going to stick with it. Comprehensive action against all forms of cruelty, investigations, lawmaking, enforcement, awareness building, publishing, writing. And again, I think the most important thing, the application of logic and the logical extension of anti-cruelty principles. That's really what we're about.
All right, very good. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, other speakers. And most of all, thank you to those of you who registered and joined us tonight for this conversation. We have a busy agenda. These are 3 key parts of it. So your interest in them is very much noted, and you hearten us with your support. We'll announce soon our next Claudia Miller Ignite series on animal welfare webinar. We'll send out emails on that, and we hope you'll join us then. So that said, on behalf of all of our speakers, we'll bid you a good night. Thank you very much.